You're listening to the Dibbly-Dobbly podcast. Remember to like, share, comment, subscribe, and click the bell to make sure you get the latest episodes of the podcast. Be sure to like and share our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and on Instagram. We've talked about Test cricket, Gabe. Let's talk about one-dayers. And that's been in the talking point, hasn't it, with the news about Ben Stokes retiring. Now, hear me out here, Gabe. I think the reason why we're talking about the future of one-day cricket all of a sudden is because of Ben Stokes' retirement from one-dayers. Now, if he retired from T20 internationals, which I think he should have, but he went the other way, then we wouldn't be talking about one-dayers and the future of one-day cricket. We'll say, he's retired from T20 internationals. That's less important. He'll play ODIs and test matches for England. But for him to retire from ODIs was a bit of a shock. And that's why we're talking about it. So, Gabe, what are your thoughts on, first of all, one-day cricket? What do you like about it? What do you dislike about it? And what do you think about the Stokes situation? Do you think other players will follow his lead in the future?
This is all you need to know. ODI is Ben Stokes' best format. He's actually a better ODI player than he is a T20 player. But I think it's a sign of the times, man. I think Ben Stokes understands that, T20, because it's more of a television product. And there's the rumors of it, going to the Olympics. And of course, you've got now US with their T20 team. And you've got the IPL, you've got the BBL, you've got the 100. As far as a revenue stream, it's a lot easier for players to make money when they're not playing test that way. I think it's a sign of the times that, people always say fear that test is going to die. I don't think test will die simply because you've got the history, the tradition there. But I think that what might suffer is ODI simply because it doesn't have the allure. It doesn't have the
history behind
the
it.
history of Test.
It does have history a little bit with the World Cups, but I can understand what you're trying to say. Yeah.
But it doesn't have the what do you call it? It just doesn't have the history, the reputation, the allure of Test. But at the same time, it takes just as long, just over the course of the day, not necessarily a 4 or 5 day Test match. You know what I mean? So it's not a television product. ODI is just not a television product, similar to Test, right? Because unfortunately, it's too long. You're talking about 6, 7, 8 hours, and people ask why you talk about it television product. At least here in the States, I don't know. Maybe educate me. Maybe it's not like this internationally, but teams make more money off TV than they do at the stand. They don't care what they sell tickets for at the stands. They don't care how many people are in attendance. There's stadiums here in American sports where the teams, especially when it's cold and the weather's bad out. If the team's not winning, their stadium they're empty. Doesn't matter. They've got those TV contracts. They're making money. It's collectively bargained, right? So even if we're not drawing, collectively other teams are blocked, and I'm talking about the NFL specifically. Other teams are drawing, so we're all making money. And it's one of the things that's same thing with the NBA. So television ratings dominate sports, at least here in America, so much because that's where the revenue stream is at, and the guaranteed revenue stream is at. So networks don't want a game to go over 3 or 4, and we've seen it in cricket. Actually, now that I think about it, what was the game Nick and I reacted to? I think it might have been an ODI.
The semi-final of the World Cup, England, South Africa, 92. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean? They cutting it short because they had some programming that exactly it got revenue from commercials, revenue from television. That's really the driving force behind it. So I think that ODI is in trouble, and I think that the more T20 leagues you see, where you've got, to your point, you mentioned it earlier, there's too much cricket, right? Players are getting hurt. Players are not able to play for their teams. A lot of times they're unfit because they got hurt, playing in the IPL or playing in the BBL or playing in, the CPL or now the 100. And I think that you cannot knock players for playing in those domestic leagues, but if they're going to be playing in those domestic leagues, then it would only make sense for T20 to continue because that's going to help them sharpen their skills for those domestic leagues, and it's not as an abrupt change in the format, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they're not going from 50 overs in ODIs to now T20 where they're playing 10 overs. Well, 10, yeah, I mean 20 overs. Excuse me. Um, but I mean, what do you think?
Um, I like one-day cricket personally because I think in Australia, with what happened with World Series cricket back in the late 70s, people have memories of going to watch those first matches under lights, like the West Indies were in pink, for example,
Right,
um, and watching that. So it's much loved in Australia because I remember last summer where we didn't have one-day cricket at all. That was the first time in 40 years that an Australian cricket summer did not have a one-day international
right,
ever in the last 40 years. And people were outraged. They said, where's the one day cricket? Because New Zealand, who are going to play this summer,
right,
their ODI series was meant to be played last summer
right,
because of what happened the year before that summer when
right,
the last 2 years happened,
right,
So because the stuff with the borders and that, they couldn't do it. So that's why I got cancelled. But I think in Australia, people still have that connection to one day cricket and they still love it. Because we've had such a great history as an Australian cricket team in one day cricket with World Cups. We've won 5.
right.
We have that connection. So I think there's even the next 4 years, the ICC have scheduled more ODIs going forward. I think there's I got it in front of me here. It's like 281 in the next 4 years.
Wow, that's a lot.
So that's a lot. So they think there's still a future for it. The World Cups will keep happening, and people will still watch it. But also with timings and that, because I've gone to 2 one-day internationals,
Right,
and that was at the Adelaide Oval against Australia in India and Australia South Africa. I didn't go to the first innings of that match. I went to the second
right,
innings, which is the
right,
nighttime period.
right,
Because obviously
right,
in Adelaide, in the Australian summer, it's hot. It's like 40 degrees. I
right,
don't know what that is in Celsius, Gabe, because you use that over there in America, but it's hot. I can tell you
right,
that it's hot.
right, right,
So people have that choice of going to the first innings or the second innings. You have that choice. You don't have to watch the whole game. You can watch it on TV, then go to the ground and experience like that because
right, right,
it's a different experience when you watch cricket at the ground.
right.
The Sports Breakdown says, yeah, also your thoughts whether ODI cricket should be reduced to 40 overs instead of 50 overs to make cricket have more quality, according to ex-Indian coach Ravi Shastri and Usman Khawaja as well. Your thoughts on that, Gabe? Do you think they should shorten the amount of overs from 50 to 40? Because it hasn't been 50. It's been varied over the years in one-day cricket.
You know, I think that the current format for ODI is the one thing that's really interesting. And you run out of bowling. You really do. You know what I mean? Because you
Mm,
gotta get 50 overs, and a lot of these teams will have 40 overs for sure. But then they gotta piecemeal those other 10 overs. You know what I mean? And you got part-time spinners in there, and I think that you know it's what makes for the excitement that you're gonna have an all-rounder come in there, or even a part-time spinner come in there. You'll see a Joe Root, you know what I mean, go in there to get a few overs because you know what I mean. Traditionally, you're gonna go with your 4 frontline bowlers, and then if it was, I think it would benefit the teams, but then maybe make the games less competitive or less challenging for the teams, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Oh, 40 overs, no sweat. We got our 4 bowlers. You know what I mean? Now we can go ahead and stack our lineup with 7 batsmen, and we're good to go. You know what I mean? Or just maybe a
mm,
part-time all rounder. But what with that, you've got guys that you got to throw in there that you're going to need overs from, whether it's a Cam Green, you know what I'm saying, or somebody to that effect. So for Australia, you know what I mean, because you don't have a choice. You don't have a choice. And Moeen Ali for England, you're going to have to get some overs out of him, and especially if it's a guy like Moeen Ali who's so good with the bat, but can be suspect with the ball and tend to get pumped from time to time. Um, yeah, I think that man, being an all rounder is tough business, man. That's why they're so valuable. That's why they're
mm.
so valuable. Jason Holder, one of my favorite West Indies player. That's what makes him so valuable. You know what I mean? Because he can help you with the bat or the ball, and you know he's a great player. I think that he's had so much pressure because when we started watching cricket, he was the captain of the test team. I think he was also the captain of the ODI team. I think it was yeah, because Pollard was the captain of the T20 squad.
Yeah.
And like he's a young kid. Jason Holder's still young, man. And think about this. This was 3 years ago. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of responsibility to, put I think at the time it was like maybe 25 or 26-year-old captain of the, West Indies test side. That's a lot of decisions to make. And then you're an all rounder. So a lot of responsibilities put on your shoulders. And I think that taking that responsibility away from him has definitely improved this game.
Yeah. An interesting fact about that, they did actually have 40 overs in the first ever ODI, which was back in 1971, actually, in Melbourne, between Australia and England. Interesting story with that, because the test match of that Ashes series was washed out. So they replaced it with a one-day exhibition match, which was the first one-day international. And they had 40 overs aside, and Australia won that match. Over the years, it's been 60 overs, especially in the early World Cups. Excuse me. And now they've kept it to 50. So, yeah, well, it'll be interesting whether it's going to end or not. I'm not sure. And then T20 is going to be the dominant format. I think it still has a place in the game. But we have to wait and see because we can't predict the future. But it is a bit worrying when, the only way we've sort of the media and that have just reacted to this, really, that he retired Ben Stokes from one-day cricket, so it's dying.
I mean, I think about what you just said, right? There was no ODI cricket in Australia, and to your point, you said New Zealand was supposed to come. Okay, so you're telling me that for the entire summer they only scheduled one ODI series? That's it. Even if New Zealand had came, it should have been concerning that they only scheduled one ODI series. Now maybe they scheduled more. All of them got canceled, but they all got canceled.
Well, who played last summer? No, it was meant to be ODIs against New Zealand because usually when it's an Ashes series, you have an ODI series after an Ashes series in Australia. That didn't happen last summer because we had to, get New Zealand back to reschedule that series. Obviously, England will come out with some ODIs this summer, but South Africa won't because they pulled out. Because we haven't mentioned that because South Africa pulled out of that ODI series against Australia because of that T20 league that's starting in South Africa in January was clashing with the series that was proposed in Australia. And they sort of conceded South Africa that we won't qualify for the 50-over World Cup anyway. We'll play in the qualifying tournament because you know about the Cricket World Cup Super League, Gabe,
Right.
which is qualification for the World Cup next year.
Right.
If you finish in the bottom half from 9 to 13, you have to play in a qualifying tournament in Zimbabwe.
Right.
So South Africa are already at the bottom. They thought, well, we're not going to get into the top 8. India are already qualified, so because they're the host nation,
Right.
So they've already made it qualify. But South Africa thought, we've got this new T20 league starting in January. We don't want it to clash with the series in Australia. So that's why we're not going to tour. So they've given away 30 points to Australia, basically, because they knew that we'll take our chances in the qualifying tournament. But it's not guaranteed that you're probably going to win because Ireland and these other nations are doing well now.
And I mean,
so they're taking that big risk on their shoulders.
I think the last thing I'm going to say on that topic is this. You got now you got South Africa. I didn't even know South Africa was coming in. I mean, it's been a busy summer for me. Obviously, my kids out in college now in North Dakota, playing football out there, school, whatever. But so let me get this straight. You've got regular T20 schedule. You've got the IPL. You've got the CPL. You've got the BBL. You've got the 100. You've got the Sri Lankan Premier League, right? SPL. You've got the Pakistan has their own
Pakistan
T20
Super
league.
League. You've got the Bangladesh
PSL.
Premier League.
And the definitely league South.
You've South
I'm running out
Africa,
of fingers. I'm running out of fingers now. And
a
listen
lot.
again. And now again, are they going to cancel tests or are they going to cancel ODI series? Which is more likely to get canceled because the teams or nations don't have their premier players that they want, and maybe they're pushing their own league. Like again, England is pushing the 100 hard. You know what I mean? It's where the money's at, man. It's where the money's at. I am sorry. I know people are losing their mind. Better than tests, but I just think that it's definitely going to take a chunk out of one day international because cricket, because there's just not enough days on the calendar, bro. There's just not enough days in the calendar.
No, there isn't. That's why when we talk about the international schedule, you'll be amazed at how many matches there are scheduled for all countries. It's a lot. To finish off on one-day cricket before we move on to T20 cricket, the sports breakdown says the thing is that viewership is decreasing a bit in ODI cricket due to the franchise leagues happening in the start of the South Africa T20 League, UAE T20 League, Women's IPL, and IPL is extended, yes. So definitely T20 leagues are taking over international cricket at the moment.
Hi everyone, hope you enjoyed our cricket discussion with Gabe from Cricket for Americans on all things one-day cricket. Let us know in the comments your thoughts about one-day cricket. We would love to hear what you have to say.